ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the Seattle Sounders FC Sideline Chat. My name is Darren Heaton with Science of Sport, and we want to thank you all for tuning in, and we're going to take an inside look at how we can use soccer to help students learn about STEM and improve their academics, and also help expose you all to different job types that take place within the front office for sports. So today, my colleague, Carly Stevens, and I will be going through different STEM activities for you all to do at home, with your families, in the classroom, wherever that environment is where you can kind of use these topics to help you with your academics, but also help you out with your athletics. So we're going to take the next 50 minutes here to really go through some fun topics for you, and we're grateful to be having some great staff from the Seattle Sounders to talk with us. And first, I just wanted to allow Ashley Fosberg, who is the executive director for Rave Foundation, which is the charitable arm for the team, to say a couple words. How you doing, Ashley?
Hey, Darren, I'm great up here in Seattle. How are you guys? I'm happy to see everybody, well. My buddies. So great to be here. And, you know, I just wanted to say hi and just tell you on behalf of Rave and the Sounders how inspired we are by you guys, you students who are working so hard on this program at home and at school and learning how to maybe get a little more literate in STEM concepts, science, technology, engineering, and math using soccer. I'm going to assume and hope there's lots of soccer fans among us today. And we just want to reinforce that we think you're amazing. And we're here to help inspire you guys to learn. And thank you so much for doing all you do to be great students. And I'm so excited for you to meet my buddies from Sounders FC in a little bit, because they're excited to meet you too. So thanks so much, guys. And we think you're great. And we hope to have you all down to a Sounders match sometime in the future when we all can gather, like the picture behind me. So just know that's in our future, and we'll be working on that with you guys soon. Okay? Have fun. Thanks, Darren.
Thanks, Ashley. Fingers crossed, right? I think that's the goal we're all hoping to get back to, slowly but surely. But we have three incredible guests that are going to be joining, and you can see them on the screen here. But I just wanted to start with Heidi, who is the team physical therapist. How's it going, Heidi?
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. It's going to be awesome to learn a little bit about your background and perspective and on all this. So as we're going to go through some of these questions, we've gotten some student questions on the front end. So I'd like to kickstart this off with one of the student questions from Jacob, who's a third grader, and he would like to know, how did you become a team physical therapist?
A lot of it was, I fortunately got to meet the head athletic trainer, and so through referrals from him, I treated a lot of different patients throughout the last couple of years that came from either families or other people, and fortunately those people got well. Whether or not it was time, but so luckily they did well with me, and so got my name out there a little bit with that. And then I also developed a return to play program that I worked with Toka, one of the companies in the area that does a ball unit. And so we worked with 13 to 18-year-olds, trying to get them on the back end of their ACL reconstruction back on the field safely. So that kind of set me up to take the position.
That's excellent. And what kind of educational background did you have?
Yeah, I have a bachelor's of science in health and human performance with a specialty in exercise physiology and kinesiology. So, and then my second degree would be my doctorate of physical therapy. It's a clinical doctorate, and that encompasses everything. And then you specialize after you get out of school. And so I have I'm board certified orthopedic specialist on top of it, and a certified strength and conditioning coach.
Great. And so, like, for the students that are watching, you know, what would you say is kind of that key element for anyone that's looking to get into that type of job field to know and start to kind of be more exposed to?
I think a lot of it is the sports that you love. Really start to know what it is about the sports. You start to know the movement patterns, and so knowing that you enjoy science because you'll have lots of years of science classes from physics to chemistry to biology and so on, and then through that, then liking people. I think that was the major thing of, not that physicians don't like students or people, but I spend 45 minutes plus if you're in a clinic, or if I'm with a team, I'm spending hours on end with people and having to talk. So knowing that you enjoy interacting with people or figuring out how to is a big part of it.
Awesome. Thanks, Heidi. We'll come back to you in a little bit, but wanted to introduce our next guest. And we're thrilled to be able to have Brad Evans joining us today. And he's a brand ambassador for the Sounders and a former first team member who played with MLS for 11 seasons. How's it going, Brad?
Good. Pardon the noise. I'm waiting for soccer practice to start after we're done with this meeting. So if it sounds like a rainstorm, I am inches away. But super excited to be here to share some knowledge, share some experience. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it, Brad. The first question, kind of sticking on the theme here, is from a student. Monset is a first grader at MWC, and dropping some knowledge is the question is, how hard is it to play professional soccer? So what sort of knowledge can you let us know about that?
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer. But what I will say, okay, yes, it's very, very difficult. But what I will say is that after being in the league for 12 years, so first I was drafted to Columbus where I played 2 seasons, then Seattle Sounders for 9, and then I spent the last season in Kansas City. Meeting so many different types of people from all around the world is that thinking about whether it's professional athletics or it's, even getting a job, is that everyone's path is so different. There's no one clear-cut path to becoming a professional athlete or becoming a doctor or whatever it is, right? So I think understanding that, yes, it's really difficult, but it also is, everyone's path is so different that if I told you, yes, just go out and train really hard, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be a professional athlete, right? So making sure that the biggest things for me were watching soccer, number one, or watching the sport that you love, because I think that we can retain so much information just by watching something, just like osmosis of absorbing everything that we're watching. So whether it's watching Barcelona or the Sounders, or watching your favorite player play, all these things can really help you get to the next level without even touching a soccer ball, which is the crazy thing about it, right? It's like reading a book about soccer can help you on the soccer field, actually. So I'd say the hardest thing is the toll that it takes on your body, for sure, is feeling like you've been hit by a car every time you play a soccer game. That was probably the hardest thing for me, was just physically. Mentally, I could do it, but physically it was so demanding. That was probably the most difficult part, but I loved every minute of it. Even that physical side of it, and being tired and being sore and everything that came with it.
It's safe to say that it'd be very tough for you to do your job without Heidi to be
Absolutely.
able to help you recover, right?
Yeah, without a support team around you in anything, you're just not going to make it as far. So being very fortunate to have, really good staff with the Sounders over the years has been, tremendous, and keeping guys healthy. We as players, we kind of, we expect the best at the Sounders because it is the best MLS club. That's how we view it, right? And so to have, someone like Heidi, who I don't know personally, but we have mutual acquaintances, and so I know the pedigree. And it was no question when I found out that she was going to be involved with the Sounders that it was like, oh, okay, yeah, that the guys are going to love it. It's going to be a great fit. Keep these guys healthy. And as this sports science has kind of evolved, even over the 12 years since I was in the league, when I first got into the league, just seeing where it is now, leaps and bounds. It's no wonder that, now we're seeing doctorates of sport and, just that background in soccer specifically, which I think is huge for the progression of our players.
Yeah, that's excellent. And it sounds like no matter what you're trying to do, having a strong work ethic and really kind of using that to help you succeed, whether it's going to be a doctor, whether it's going to be a professional soccer player. Any other advice that you might give to some of the students that are on this or will be watching later that are just starting to play soccer?
Yeah, I would say, and I'm coaching high school soccer right now, and it's a pretty good level. But even I see at the high school level that players, I coach girls and boys, aren't doing enough away from practice to better themselves when it comes to game time. They think that just showing up to practice for an hour and a half, 2-3 days a week is going to get them to where they ultimately want to be. When the reality is the players, the women or the men at the highest level, they're doing stuff behind the scenes while you're watching TV, while you're, hanging out at the movies or hanging out with your friends or, skateboarding or doing, other stuff, where these other players are, at a soccer field with headphones on and they're juggling and they're dribbling and they're finding pickup games with men's league teams and women's league teams. It's not to say that you shouldn't have fun outside of soccer, but also the real dedication is to take time, not just when the whistle blows for practice in the games, but taking time out throughout the day to really hone in on your skills. And that's one thing that I'll always remember is getting yelled at by my parents for juggling inside of the house, right? But it was something that I just did consistently. And I still think back to those days of just turning on the radio and juggling in the house and seeing how many juggles can I get in 45 minutes, right? Setting these little tangible goals that I can see and that I can work towards, that ultimately I think helped me, play at the level that I did for as long as I did.
That's great, Brad. We'll appreciate that, and we'll come back to you in a second. Want to kind of move on here to our third guest, and really excited as this position has started to evolve more and more over the years. But we have Brandon Morin, who is the head of development performance for Sounders FC. So thank you so much for joining, Brandon, and just kind of start us off here. Tell us in the simplest form what it is exactly development performance means.
Yeah, it's a mouthful. I oversee the physical and overall wellness of the developing players within the system. That would include our U15s, our U17s, and our second team, as well as those players who've already been signed to the first team, the youngsters, so the Danny Levas of the world, and those individuals kind of come up and down from the first team environment down into the second team environment. My role is really working with them on a day-to-day basis and helping their overall development. So yeah, and then of course I have an assistant, so that's a lot of players, and I don't do it all on my own. There's a big group of us that collaborate together.
How many other staff members are within your department?
Well, we have Adam, who is the head of the high performance director, Ash, who is a sports scientist, Sean, who is the first team S&C, strength and conditioning coach, and then myself, who is kind of a combination of all of those things in one, S&C, sports science, and I kind of bridge the gap with medical staff and the coaching staff and help oversee that relationship as well. And then of course I have Vince, who is my assistant with the academy. He spends most of his time with our U17 ages and our U15. So that's the whole crew.
Excellent. And what sort of education do you need to work in a position like yours?
Well, I have a master's degree. It's probably not a requirement for the position. I think the way the position is, or just the way sports science is maturing, most people coming into the business are going to have at least a master's degree in a related field: health and human performance, sports science, kinesiology, nutrition. There's a combination of directions you could go with it, I guess. But for me, my undergrad was in physiology, and then I went to graduate school, and I'm actually trying to finish my PhD at the moment. So that's where I am. Yeah.
Awesome. Where are you finishing that up at?
My PhD is through Concordia University in Chicago. So most of it is all online.
Nice.
And that's what we do as professionals. I've been doing this for, gosh, going on 20 years now, and I'm just fortunate to be able to do what little schooling I can to kind of keep things going. So it's been a long road.
That's excellent advice for all the students too. Is like we're all striving to be better, no matter what it is we're doing, and education allows us to do that. So students, always remember that. But thanks again for joining.
Sure.
We'll come back, and to all the students that are watching, please feel free to throw some more questions into the chat. We're going to monitor that, and coming back to it in a little bit when we're going to do a Q&A once we talk about some STEM activities for you all to do. So I want to turn it over to my colleague Carly Stevens. How's it going, Carly?
Hey guys, thanks for joining. Can you guys hear me okay? All right. So I want to give a quick background about myself before I start telling you all about soccer. So my name's Carly Stevens. I work with Science with Sport. So I've been playing soccer since I was 3. And I actually played in college, and I played a goalkeeper, but I actually broke my finger. Funny story. If you guys can see, I broke it playing soccer and it didn't heal properly. So that's kind of my fun fact. That's the worst injury I've ever had. But I also went to Loyola University Chicago, so I majored in sports management. So I went to school and I played college soccer at the same time. And then after college, when I stopped playing, I started getting into coaching, and I coach soccer. So I coach students like you and up to college. So I just wanted to give a brief background about that. But with coaching, you have to get all sorts of different licenses and different things. So if you guys have any questions about coaching, feel free to put in the chat. But I'm going to talk about the geometry of a soccer field. So Brad and Brandon and Heidi, please correct me if I'm wrong in any of this. Ashley too, if you're on. We're going to talk about the geometry of a soccer field, and we're going to talk about Lumen Field. So I have the dry erase board here. If you guys can see this, okay. And Darren actually has a dry erase board as well. And if you guys, like Darren said, have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, either for me or for the panelists. So every soccer field has different dimensions. So here's the length and the width. So every soccer field is unique, whether if you guys have played or went to a Sounders game or a different game, each field has different dimensions. And what stays the same though, is this area. Here, let's see if I can do it. And this area. So this is the 6-yard box. So that's always 6 yards. And then the 18-yard box or penalty box, which is always 18 yards. But we're going to talk about the dimensions of Lumen Field. So Lumen, the length right here is 116 yards. Darren has it as well up there. And the width right here is 75 yards. Oops, if I can, let me spell that, 75 yards. So if you guys know, we're going to calculate the area of the field. So if you guys know the equation for area is length times width. So we go area equals length times width. So if you guys have a calculator, if you have a piece of paper, if you guys want to do this, so we're going to do 116 yards times 75 yards to get the area of this whole soccer field here. So what's the area, if you guys know, 116 yards times 75? If anyone can put it in the chat. Yeah, Megan put it in the chat right there. If you guys know, throw it in the chat. So I'll
I'll go through the area right now. So it's 8,700 yards. So we do everything in yards here. So that's the area of Lumen Field. Okay.
One other thing I just wanted to mention
Yeah,
there,
go ahead.
Carly, is not only is this something where you can just learn some math elements to or using a soccer field, but you can also identify shapes. You know, so some of the younger kids there that are watching this, you know, love to see if you can identify what shapes are on the soccer field. Throw them into the chat, and you know, we can kind of monitor that. And there's some pretty easy ones that are gonna jump out at you, so let's at least throw them in there. But you know, through this program, it's really about identifying a bunch of different ways to be able to learn about STEM, whether it's math, science, engineering, or technology. So as you look at this playing surface, I just wanted to, you know, point out it's very large, right? And soccer players are running the entire duration of a game. So if you factor in that it's 116 yards in the length, and in a mile, there are 1,760 yards, a player would have to run the full length of the soccer field approximately 15 times to reach a mile. Now stay with me. On average, soccer players run between 7 to 10 miles per game. And correct me if I'm wrong there. So that means 7 miles is equating to 160 or 106 times that they would have to run the length of the soccer field. Now that's crazy when you put it in perspective like that. So I know there have been some really creative technological ways to track this. And I want to pose a question here for Brandon. What sort of wearable technology is used for some of these Sounders games?
Right. Well, we use GPS units. Here's one here. That's what it looks like. Just a little rectangle. And inside this is a global positioning system like you find in your car that connects to a bunch of satellites. And there's an accelerometer in here like you have in a cell phone. There's also a gyroscope in this. And what it does is it tracks not just the total distance the players are running, but the quality of the distance, meaning how fast are they running? Are they changing direction? How many times do they change directions? The acceleration. So when they accelerate and sure. Is there a question?
Was there a question there, Megan? We'll continue. We'll throw it in the chat.
It was one of the Luann's. Not sure.
So, okay, and yeah, so that's what we use, and what it does is connect. Well, we put it in a vest, and the vest is obviously on the player, and this unit sits between their shoulder blades. So whatever the player does, the unit does as well, and that's kind of how it tracks. So it's the actual unit it's the player's doing the work, but the unit is moving, and as the unit moves around the field, it will record the distance and the type of distance, so how fast they run. And we do everything in meters per second. That's how we measure things, meters per second.
Brad, have you had to wear these? And you know, what sort of knowledge have you been able to gain, you know, from that?
I mean, we could be here for 5 days talking about this with these sport. I always love talking to our sports scientist teams, and you know, there's many schools of thoughts on sports science. A lot of coaches that got into coaching very early on, let's say 40 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, maybe. They're pretty old school, right? And we all know that the older you are, the less technology you like. Like if you went to your grandpa's house, grandma, and said, hey, can you open this on my iPhone and open me a video, da da da, they're probably gonna be like, I don't know how to do that. So when I first started playing, we didn't have GPS. And so slowly, Brandon and guys like him had to teach me what we were doing. And ultimately, it became this really valuable tool that I think extended my career by, at least a couple of years. It even got to the point where when I was at the height of my career, probably in like 2015, so this is like 5 or 6 years ago, there was a point where during the summer, in the really difficult months, I would play a hard game as a midfielder, like you said, running 9-10 miles a game, and doing it at really high intense levels. And during the week at training, I would do the warm up, and then Brandon would pull me aside and say, you're just going to ride a bike today, while other guys trained, right? So it was their way to say, okay, we can use this information that we're gathering from the games and telling the coaches, if he trains too hard this week, he is at risk for injury. And if a team is paying you and you're injured, you're not of much use. So the healthier the guys are, the better the team ends up being. And all these little GPS units we wear is a really valuable tool to keep guys healthy and keep them on the field, right? Which is the ultimate goal with a sports team. So there's a lot of pressure on these guys to prove why this stuff works. And ultimately, by testing that, they did that, and they've done that. So I mean, like I said, early in my career, a lot of injuries in the middle of the summer, and then it got to a point where they were like, hey, you're just going to do a warm up and you're going to ride a hard bike session, not even train, and then you're going to play on the weekend. So it was a little bit bizarre in the beginning, but ultimately it allowed me to play almost an entire season without missing more than maybe 1 or 2 games, which as a player, yes, you want to train because that's why you play soccer. But if you can stay healthy, that's the number one thing. And that's what these tools allow us as players to do. One other thing that's really cool about it is, like Brandon said, it measures your top speed. So, when you're driving in your car with your family and you see those things that tell you how fast you're going, this unit on our back is basically that thing. So we know how fast we're running all the time. And so after games, they'll do a big printout, and it'll be on the wall when we walk into training, and it'll tell us how far we've run after the game. And you kind of like look at your teammate or someone that you kind of compete with in the same position and say, I ran faster than you, or I ran farther than you, because ultimately as athletes, everything is a competition. Super fun.
Yes. And Heidi, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, the sports scientists are some of our best friends, like Brad mentioned, and Brandon. We utilize that every week in every practice. So we look at it with them, Brandon, I talk with Ash usually. They compile it for us every single day. And so we either look at the people that are on the pitch, or we have the injured players that we're rehabbing. And we're also looking at, as we put them on the field and ramp up their progression of getting to go back to playing with the rest of the team, what are they doing with accelerations? Do we have a days that we concentrate on accelerations and decelerations? And then we have a day that we concentrate more on high speed. And so this tells us, are they tired? Because there's another thing that's on there that looks at their stress load, or how much, and correct me if I explain this wrong, Brandon, how much force they're putting into the ground. And so some guys put in a lot. You'll see like a stomper is what I call them, just as a non-medical term. When they run, they're very heavy. So they track that, and we can tell, even though that person always has a high number, it can actually increase if they're not recovering well enough. And so usually there's certain days during the week, like Brad mentioned, we take out certain players depending on their position or history of injuries to try and protect them so that they can recover and be healthy enough to then in a game run those high speeds or do a lot of cutting and turning on the field without being injured. So it helps us do our job, which I'm very thankful for, because it's a guessing game otherwise. And it also helps the sports performance side of it. Adam Owens, who does the first team too, and Brandon, obviously, when he does it, to kind of direct what's the flow between each game. Do they have lots of games during the week? And so that way we can all meld together rather than having like separate little compartments of the medical staff versus the performance versus the coaches. When you blend them all together, it actually makes us a very efficient unit to try and help the guys stay on the pitch and get to play.
Excellent. Well, that kind of is a natural transition into our following topic, which is human anatomy. So Carly, let's talk a little bit about the STEM activity, kind of a general idea of the lesson here and how students can do this at home.
Yeah, I wanted to mention too, for those of you who have the STEM activity bags for the geometry of a soccer field, feel free to use your dry erase board or your chalk to create your own field, do your own dimension. So I just want to mention the STEM activity bag component to that. And Darren is holding it up right now. If you guys have that, feel free to do that with, you know, your family and friends, create your own, you know, soccer field using your own materials at home. But so for anatomy, you know, in soccer, you can use basically every part of the body except your hands. The goalkeeper is the only person that can use their hands, and they only can use it inside this box right here. And actually, when Brad was talking about juggling, that's kind of a part of our anatomy lesson, is that we have a juggling lesson where the STEM activity bag, if you have it, there's balloons, soccer balls, soccer beach balls that help you juggle, keep the ball up in the air, whether that's the balloon, soccer ball, or beach ball. And you can use the different parts of your body, whether that's your thigh, your shoulder, your head, or your foot, to keep it up in the air. And Brad, I was wondering, what's like your ultimate juggling score if you ever kept it? And do you have any tips for kids? I know you're talking about juggling earlier, but do you have any tips for them to become like a great juggler or extra activities they can do on the side?
Yeah, all-time record, that's a great question. I don't remember my all-time record. I think at some point it gets to where you're just like, okay, I could be out here for hours and I'm never going to drop the ball. So you kind of have to pull the plug on it at a certain point. But so what I do with the high school kids and now coaching the middle school kids also, when they start juggling, imagine standing there with a balloon in your hand and then dropping it right out in front of you, kicking it with your laces on your shoe, and then trying to catch it back in your hand, right? And that would be one juggle. Now the progression from there, you can guess, is to try to get 2 in a row and then catch it, and then 3 in a row, and so on and so on. Like Carly said, we're using all parts of our body on the soccer field. So then you can use your thigh. So your thigh is that giant muscle right above your knee, right? So that's your thigh. That's a really important muscle for us as soccer players. A lot of our control comes from the thigh when we're trapping and of course, you know, juggling a soccer ball also. So doing the same thing, holding it right out in front of you and then trying to bounce that ball right off your thigh. And remember, not off your knee, not off your thigh, because we can get confused by that. And if it goes off your knee is really hard and the ball's going to shoot off in front of you and you're going to have to chase it. So for control, you really want to hit it on that thigh or that quad muscle. And then of course, we always have our head, really important in soccer and really easy to do with a balloon. That's a great progression to start with a balloon. So you almost look like a seal, right? If you've ever seen a seal juggling like a ball on its nose, that's kind of what you look like. So you're going to throw the balloon in the air, touch it with your forehead, which is the spot right above your eyes, and then try to catch that ball back into your hands. So there's a lot of progressions there. And as you get better, you can graduate from balloon to a beach ball and then to a small soccer ball. Even guys now, professionals, they use tennis balls to juggle with. And they can do that for like 30, 40 times in a row. And that's really difficult. So as you start to get better, start to use different types of balls, and that's where your experience and that extra time that I talked about earlier is going to benefit your skills.
Yeah, we actually have a hacky sack in one of the STEM activity bags, so that could be a substitute for the tennis ball.
So every lunch period in high school, we played hacky sack. I would eat my lunch as fast as I could, and then there were 10 of us that played hacky sack. So that is a really, really useful tool also.
Yeah, we have a worksheet in our STEM activity booklet where they label the different parts. So just the anatomy, and then we go into juggling with the balloon, with the beach ball, progressing to the soccer ball. So just getting comfortable with the ball and keeping it up in the air, more importantly, because when we're juggling, we want to make sure to keep the ball up in the air. That'll help us with our soccer skills.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So can you break down the game hacky sack? Because I feel like we gotta explain it a little bit for the youngsters here.
Okay, so I'm sure, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's many different ways that you can play hacky sack. The way that we played in high school was pretty aggressive. So we always started off, the hacky sack had to be on the ground, then someone would flip it up with their feet, and then it had to go 3 soft touches. And then you could almost like kick it hard. And then if it hit off of that person's body and hit the ground and they couldn't keep it in the air, then that was a strike for them. If you got 3 strikes, you were out. So it's a little bit different than a normal hacky sack game, but it was really competitive. And I think that's why our control was so good, because you were getting the hacky sack kicked at you and you had to like take a nice soft touch off your chest and then trap it with your feet. And, oh man, this actually brings me back to some great memories.
Sounds like we know what's going to happen at practice today.
I was just watching the boys walk by. I need to get some hacky sacks.
That's great. Well, I think we all know which part of the body that we are not supposed to use in soccer. So kind of going back to the human anatomy portion of it, and just our bodies in general as it relates to soccer. And we talked a lot about running and the mileage and tracking your heart rate. What I would love to know, like, what is the most common injury when playing soccer? And this is probably geared towards Heidi or Brandon.
Typically, like for professionals, we usually see strains. So the most common of those strains would be the hamstring. So strains, we talk about them in relation to a muscle. The next one would be sprains, which is when we talk about ligaments. So you hear about an ankle sprain or an LCL or an MCL, or the most common that you hear is an ACL, which usually isn't a sprain. Well, it is a sprain, it's a grade 3, which means it's completely torn. And so we grade them. That would be the top 2 that I would say for strains and then sprains. Do you have anything to add, Brandon?
No, I think hamstrings is always the big one. Yeah.
So what can students do to avoid that?
We strengthen them. That's the biggest thing. So we talk about resiliency. And so that just means, can you withstand having multiple forces all the time come off of that muscle? So sprinting and everything. Sprinting is a big force on the hamstrings. So we go through a couple different strengthening exercises. The key one that we usually use and that we see in research and everything is the Nordic hamstrings. So you're kneeling, someone's either holding onto your feet. There's a couple different ways to do it, but essentially you put your feet into something. While you're kneeling, you keep your trunk straight and you go down and make sure you catch yourself so you don't face plant it into the ground. And during that thing, that's the most load on your hamstrings. So we use it a lot with both injured players and with keeping the players healthy. So that's the main one.
Are there, Heidi, I was going to ask you, sorry, Darren, is there any other stretches that are good for soccer players, like hip flexors? I know, like hamstring. I know I had a hamstring issue. I'm sure, Brad, we might ask you about your injuries. I'm sure you had. No, we're not. Okay.
We don't have enough time.
What kind of stretches, for students, if they're warming up before they're playing, are good for soccer players or just in general?
I usually, if they're getting ready to play, I don't have them do any static stretching. So meaning like you're holding a stretch for, say, 30 seconds. So typically when we get ready to play, we do more of a dynamic motion. So like laying on your back, holding the back of your thigh and kicking up and down slow just to get it motion. And then lots of times I'll add in a quick kick. So that kind of preps it for getting ready to sprint. There's several different ones you can use. Other times I'll have them hold their legs up in the air and they have to drop one foot to the ground and then come back up. It gets their core or your trunk ready. And then it also makes the leg that stays in the air get a little bit of a stretch on the hamstring. So those are 2 simple ways that we can get it ready. Or the last one would be like a down dog. So going back, walking out. Sometimes we call them inchworms if we have them go up and down the field with them for the younger players.
Yeah, we talk about the importance of stretching before and after physical activity, and how, you know, important it is to do those activities, you know, while, you know, they're playing too. And I heard dynamic stretching is the way to go. Like you're actively doing the stretches. You're not just standing there for 30 seconds and holding it. It's the active part, getting them ready for sprinting. And I actually, back to, you know, the main point we were talking about, you know, when you're talking about like running and you're kind of stomping, my coach always told me to run on my toes. Like if I'm sprinting, I should be running like with my weight on my toes. It makes me go a little faster instead of my you know, weight going on my back heel, which kind of slows me down. So I don't know.
Yeah, it comes back to, if you watch any sprinter, whether in soccer or on the track, you're usually on your toes. When you start to hit with your heels and you're sprinting, it means you're probably overstepping, which means your stride is too big. And then you come into the physics of that, and you're going to create a negative force, which will slow you down and then causes more force through your joints, which can cause injury in the future. So yeah, keeping your toes underneath you, or your feet underneath you, and staying on your toes is a good cue for that.
Brad, did you have anything you want to add?
Geez. You want to talk about injuries?
Stretching or injuries? Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I had a number of injuries: knee surgery, shoulder dislocation, where this shoulder was just sitting in front of my chest, and some pretty gnarly stuff. But ultimately, the one that ended my career was a herniated disc in my lower back. What the training staff, and what would be important for you youngsters, is even when you're thinking about solving a problem, not looking at the injury itself and what happened to that muscle. So I had a chronic issue with my calf. And in my opinion, and now looking back on it, I think it was coming from my L5-S1 from my lower back, having a bulging disc there that was hitting the nerve root, and that would cause pain down into my calf, and almost like a misfire, right? So what would feel to me like a muscle strain, I would go get an MRI, and they would tell me that there's no inflammation. You know, I'd go to get an injection, a PRP, and the doctor would say, I'm not injecting anything because I don't see anything. And I tell them, no, I'm sure. It felt like somebody, you know, poked me with a red hot iron, or like an electric shock right in the back of my calf. So as you start to think about problems and solving them, making sure that you're looking at the bigger picture and not just what's right in front of you. I think ultimately that would have helped me out quite a bit, but you know, at the end of the day, it's a number of injuries, and that just happens as you play sports. Injuries happen. But yes, I would say absolutely taking care of your body is number one, and that's by what you eat, how you sleep, what you drink also, right? No sugary drinks, none of that. Making sure that water is your main source, you know, mixing in some electrolytes, because as you start to run, that can be really important. And also I think yoga can be, you know, now that I'm done playing, I always have these what ifs. Like, what if I had done yoga, you know, at least 2 days a week from when I was 18 years old, right? When I kind of started playing at that top tier level, or even, you know, middle school. If I could implement that early in my life, I think it would have given me a great advantage moving forward. And I guess the last piece is you don't want to have any what ifs, right? You don't want to sit here and say, what if I would have done this? So ultimately just taking a leap of faith and dedicating, you know, 2 hours a week to yoga, right? Just 2 1-hour sessions, or break it up. You want to do 4 30-minute sessions you can find on YouTube. Yoga for kids, right? Super easy, I'm sure. But having that good base moving forward, I think will help out as you decide to become a, you know, a professional athlete, or decide to, you know, train like one, building those good habits early.
Yeah, that's great. And, you know, I've had a similar mindset when I was growing up playing, and I was more on the baseball side. But, you know, the key takeaway, I think we can all pretty much agree with, is that stretching is equally as important as the strengthening portion of it. So please consider that and reference the workbook and the lesson that we have there. So let's keep on going. Brad, are you heading out to practice? Are we gonna say goodbye?
Yeah, I
Perfect.
would, yeah. So thank you, obviously, for having me and letting me just kind of tell a little bit about my story and how I either prep for a game or have used these tools because I think this is invaluable at your age. This is really cool. So if you need anything from me, I'm sure you can reach out to anyone in this room and they'll get a hold of me if you have more questions. Happy to be a resource any way I can.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate it, and we'll definitely stay in touch. And we already have some people in the chat. Looks like that they're going to be looking into some yoga for kids, and maybe you can incorporate some yoga today and some juggling in practice. So have a good one, and Heidi, Brandon, stick with us, and we're going to continue this discussion. But thanks again, Brad.
Thank you. See you guys.
Take care. All right, let's move on. We're going to do a quick explanation on formations, and then we're going to leave it open to some questions for the group. And I see a couple there. So let's talk a little bit about the formations activity, Carly.
Sure. So some of you know in your STEM activity book, there's a lesson on player formations and player positions. So in soccer, there are different positions. For example, I played goalkeeper, so I helped keep the ball out of the net basically, and defenders, they defend the goal, and then midfielders help scoring the goals and they help on defense, and then there's forwards who are on the other side of the field trying to score the goals. So in soccer, there's different formations, and usually there's 11 players. I know at the younger age there might be 6 or 8, but usually, here we go, on the soccer field there are 11 players. Or there's 22. If there's 11 on both sides, there were 22 players. So different coaches have different styles of formations they would like, and maybe we'll reach out to Brad and ask him what formation he likes best, or what coach, when he was playing, what his coach played. But a lot of the times there's different types of formations. So the most common formation is a 4-4-2. So that means there's 4 defenders, there's 4 midfielders, and there's 2 forwards. And they move up and down the field, so they can go up, down, and they have different responsibilities, and they have different parts of the field that they cover. And 4-4-2 is one formation. Darren, can you think of any other ones that I'm missing?
3-5-2.
Yeah, 3-5-2 is another one.
I want to hear from Brandon or Heidi. What's your insight on formations? Is there any sort of statistical analysis that you can kind of factor into certain players and the ability to kind of work in that formation to greater their chances to score?
I'll try and take that one. I think the difference is from a physical loading standpoint come into play when you're playing, for example, maybe you're playing with wing backs, which are your outside fullbacks, and you give them the responsibility of covering more distance, so they have to get further up the field to affect play further up the field, which means that they have to do a bit more work to recover and get back into a low block or mid block position if they're defending. And what I mean by low block or mid block is where the group of players are relative to the middle of the field. Are they more on their side of the field, or are they kind of in the middle of the field? And that's the difference between the two. And that's more of what we call a system of play versus a formation, where you have wingbacks that are in the outside channels of the field, so the wide areas of the field, and they have to run up and down the field quite a bit. And in those cases, you'll see lots of high speed running from them. So you might have a wingback who can do between 800 and 1,000 meters of high speed running in a game, and maybe they'll cover 10K or 6 miles, 6.2 miles in a game, or 12K. And a lot of that has to do with changes in formation and where the space is and how they have to occupy the space on the field. So hopefully that helps. And that answers your
Yeah.
question, Darren. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like the 4-4-2 just because there's all these triangles. Like it's a triangle, like there's always support. And as you move up the field, hopefully these triangles are there or right angles. Just so I just like it because it covers the most field. But Heidi, I'm wondering if you talk to players or coaches or staff, or I'm curious kind of what they do, or the Sounders. I know every maybe formation is different game to game depending on the coach. Thinks that one formation might be better, or someone's injured, or they have to kind of replace it. So
Yeah, I think it depends on who they have on the team too. So what's their depth? So we're playing a 5-3-2. I had to think about it for a second. And they're using the wing backs that Brandon's talking about. And fortunately for them right now, they have people that can sub in and out that are very good and are fast, and they can make that distance, so they can travel up and down the sides of the field. Where that becomes tricky is the injury prevention. So looking at them, they're running really fast and they're going up and down a lot. And so that puts a lot of stress on their bodies. And so that's where we come in and we decide if we need to take someone out so that they maybe have a lesser day on the pitch when they're doing their practice and so on. So that is not a problem. It becomes an equation of how do we make this work for who they have, because it's successful. And so I think that's changed. So if someone has an injury that takes them out for the full season, that might affect what they're doing on the field, because they don't have that player's abilities, maybe, if they don't have someone behind them. So I would say, like, in regards to the Sounders, right now, the makeup of their team is constructed to really amplify all the different spots, because they have people that can fill in for them and make it really effective, whoever's on the pitch.
All right, excellent. Well, let's move over to the Q&A, and we want to get to Nancy's question here. And her question is, why do you call yourself the Seattle Sounders? Anyone want to take that one? No. That's the beauty about STEM. Sometimes you got to research, you got to experiment and find the answers on your own. So that's a challenge for the group. There we go.
Ashley's on.
I could try. We are from the Puget Sound, which is the area where we all live and work, and the Puget Sound reaches way up north where you guys are too. And so we wanted the team wanted to reflect the region where we're from, so we named ourselves after Puget Sound, and so that's why we're the Sounders.
I love the ability to be able to tie the name back to the area that the team is, and so that there's a sense of community with it. So one of the lessons in this STEM workbook, since we're talking about it, is to develop your own team name, your own jersey and kit. So would love to hear the students what your team name would be, and why. To Ashley's point, the why there is a connection back to the region that you guys are all in. So I love that. Thanks, Ashley.
And Sammy the Sounder, right, is the mascot?
Yes, we have an orca whale named Sammy the Sounder that sometimes appears at events like this, but right now he's not available, but we hope when we can gather in person, he'll be back to work.
We'll look forward to his appearance, maybe at a game or popping in to school. Who knows?
So, yeah.
Thanks, Ashley.
So this is a question from one of the teachers. How much and in what ways do you use STEM on a daily basis?
That's a great question. We, on the sports science side, it's a huge part of our day-to-day activities. We have to, once we collect all that data from the GPS unit, we have to do something with it, and we have to put it on some type of spreadsheet and then organize it and make it nice and neat and clean so that we can visualize the information. And we use different visualization softwares to be able to see changes in total distance and how fast players are running, and maybe a player hit a new maximum speed, and we want to be able to identify that and then make those adjustments. And that's all related to what we do from a physics standpoint as well, and looking at the number of impacts that players have on a day-to-day basis, and acceleration and deceleration and the impulse that comes with that on the body. And that's all related, I think, and from an engineering perspective as well. So our day-to-day activities is deeply rooted in STEM, I would say. Anything,
Heidi, anything to add there?
Yeah, I would agree with what Brandon said. I think almost everything during the day that we, even on the medical side, we're looking at the stress on the body. So then you're looking at the breakdown of muscles. Which muscles are they using? How are they using it? If I'm doing rehab with someone and I'm trying to strengthen them, which exercise do I pick at the right time to put amount of stress on the muscle so that it gets bigger or allows more load? So then you go into physics. So I'd say almost the entire day is focused around that in some capacity.
Yeah, that's great, Heidi. And I often think that students, parents, really everyone don't really understand all the different STEM jobs that take place within sports. And so we really hope that this exposed you to opportunities, jobs, areas of interest that you can pursue. And not only these different fields, but you can be a groundskeeper, and having the knowledge about the science about the grass and the dirt and water and light to ensure that these pitches and soccer fields are in excellent condition before and during the game. And then it's going to be ready again for another game coming up. There's the engineer, the person that knows about the physics, the building of the actual structure to construct a stadium. And one of the things there for everyone, and students and teachers that are following along here, is to be able to take that concept and to have students come up with their own design of a stadium and what they would want included in it, from the field, from the distances of the actual pitch, or the concession stands of what you're going to sell. So wanted to just mention that briefly, because it is another element at times that we feel that doesn't get enough recognition or exposure, that this is an opportunity out there. We highly obviously recommend that you can be a professional soccer player, but also have the understanding that there is a life after sports too. Or maybe something doesn't pan out, you can still work within sports in these STEM different degrees. And so we really hope that this event has brought some awareness and exposed you some different opportunities, and got to hear some great guests. So thank you, Heidi, Brandon, and Brad, for jumping on and just talking a little bit more about what you guys do on a daily basis. So thank you.
And if you guys have any questions that we didn't go over, feel free to submit it to us, and we'll let them know about it. So thank you for joining.
How do you
Ashley.
And Ashley,
how do you play with the coronavirus?
It's a good
That's,
question.
that's a good question. Well, first is safely. But Heidi, Brandon, any?
I'll let Heidi take that one.
Well, the players right now, they get tested all the time, and that's so we can keep everybody safe. So like Darren said, safety is the #1 thing. And then on the side, everybody before everybody in the club themselves is vaccinated, we wore a mask all the time. And then everybody got vaccinated so that we could all in a group be safe together. If you see us without our mask, that's why, but we still want everybody to keep wearing them. But yeah, if someone gets the coronavirus, then we have to go through steps. And so they stop playing for a bit, and then we have to check them as we go to make sure that they're healthy enough to come back and play. So the overarching theme is safety.
Get vaccinated, wear your mask.
Yes, please.
Ashley, thank you so much for all your help with this, and Ray Foundation for supporting this initiative, and look forward to hopefully having the students come out to a game here soon.
Yeah. We look forward
Any
to that
parting
too.
thoughts?
No, just thank you guys. You guys are awesome. You asked great questions in the chat. Really proud of y'all. And it seems like you learned a lot. And big thanks to Darren, Carly, Megan, and all the team at Science of Sport for bringing this curriculum to life. And thank you to Barbara Peterson for bringing it up to you students.
Thank
Yes,
you,
thanks,
Barbara.
Barbara.
Thank you, the site coordinators. You guys are the ones that make this happen. So we appreciate you guys joining, and students and families. So thank you again, and let us know if you have any questions.
So my parting thoughts are, we would love for you to upload photos, upload videos of you actually doing these activities. And you can do that through your guys' different schools and sites. So if you want to upload your project, or you actually going and working on a corner kick, or practicing environmental sustainability, go to your site coordinator and ask them, and we will have some ways for you guys to do that. But again, Heidi, Brandon, Ashley, and Brad, thank you all for joining. And thank you to everyone that watched. But that is it. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.